Hello everyone and welcome to the Wargamer of Kent. Now in today's video, the first video of the channel, I just wanted to take some time to explore a finished project. It's actually quite nice to finally finish a project in Wargaming, and this project is my Italian army for World War II. Now, before we talk about systems, they could be used for both bolt action and chain of command. Now, what I tend to do, as I know others do, is you build the infantry for chain of command because you usually need a bit more rifles, and then you expand the options out for bolt action. Now, at the moment, I primarily play bolt action. I haven't really had a chance to get my teeth into version 2 of chain of command, but it's ready and raring to go when I'm a bit more versed on the rules and ready to try out the Italians, as I'm sure they will have a bit of a tactical challenge. Now, before I go into a review of kind of each of the units, what manufacturers I got them from and how I painted them, I just wanted to say that I can't speak Italian, so apologies in advance for the way I butcher some of these names. It won't be an if, it's definitely a when. Unfortunately, my Italian is completely not there at all. It's very poor, but it's been an absolute joy to build up this Italian army. It's been around the course of a year to paint it fully. I first bought some of the Italians. There was a Black Friday sale in 2022, and I picked up 2 boxes of the Warlord plastics plus a support group. I think the Italians I'd always been interested in them, because they're not necessarily an army you hear too much about. You hear some myths about their performance. I mean, they weren't very strong in the field, and this army is based around Sicily in 1943, so they're pretty much a defeated nation. But there's some last stands, a couple of counterattacks, and some areas where they're still fighting, though Sicily's kind of the last time they're really on the Axis side. Now, to start off, I'll just have a brief overview of what we've got in front of you. So here we have the 4 infantry squads in chain of command. These will be split into 2 large squads. Now, they had an interesting tactic at this period of the war where 2 light machine gun teams would be put into 1 squad, and then the other squad would be just riflemen. And they're kind of the assault team while they hold it out. Now, in bolt action, I tend to just go for 4 squads. Usually run them as 8-men squads, just means I can get a few more fun stuff, some armor in. But I have 40 of these guys painted, so pretty much as many infantrymen as I'm going to need. Now, to the right here, we have the officers. So there's quite a few of them. I've kind of picked them up over time. There's some really characterful models here that I really enjoy. Some of them are Warlord resin, some of them are the metals. So, I mean, this guy from the support group, just really in action, swinging his pistol. Really nice model there. And also the handy thing is you've got some spotters and observers. These are always really handy. I don't really tie them to a unit. I've got just a couple of guys that chat with a radio over there as well. Really handy for if you've got off-board artillery or the mortars and the artillery you can see in the background. Now, moving on to the support teams back here, these are all the Warlord resin kits. Now, I actually quite like Warlord resin. I know the jury's still out for some people, but I feel like they have a really good level of detail. As you can see from this sniper here. Quite crisp, really easy to paint. It certainly weighs a lot less than metal, which is quite nice. So yeah, I have a sniper team, an anti-tank rifle team. The Italian anti-tank rifle was a Solothurn 20mm. As you can see, quite a beast. Certainly more able to compete than, I'd say, the boys' anti-tank rifle, but in the end, it's still only 20mm. And then we have the Brixia light mortar. This is actually a World War One. Let's get a bit more in focus. A little bit of this is a World War One weapon. And it was quite well used by the Italian army in World War II. Now, the issue was that the payload of it was just quite small. So, unlike the other light mortars, like the 50mm Grantenwerfer, this one, it could land near troops, but didn't really have the shrapnel or explosive effect. But still wouldn't want to be caught under fire by one of these. And then we move on to the support team. Now, pretty much every army I build, I always do a medium machine gun. I just think they're really fun. You can make a machine gun post, which is just kind of classic World War II. And now the Italian machine gun, as you can see, had this weird, it wasn't belt fed, it was kind of strips, so it couldn't necessarily have the continuous rate of fire that a Vickers team would have, usually overheated. This is a metal kit. Now, I do prefer it when the guns themselves are made out of metal, because they inevitably will be a little bit bent on arrival, but the handy thing about metal is you can just bend them back into place. And then, of course, if you have a medium machine gun, you're going to have a medium mortar. Pretty bog standard, this one. I don't really know too much about the history of it. I just think every army's handy to have. Mortars are such a crucial weapon in platoon level World War II games. It's always good to have one. Now we move on to, well, for the Italians, heavy equipment. We've got the 47mm anti-tank gun here. No gun shield on this one, so quite easy to hide, but then if you're under fire, yeah, not the best protection. And also 47mm was fine against upwards to Crusader tanks, but by the time you're facing Shermans, Grants, it's a bit outdated. But that was all they had. They never came out with they never introduced a fully 75mm anti-tank gun into their armies. They did, on some of their late vehicles did have it equipped, but nothing for the poor infantry. And then finally on the guns, we have this 75mm artillery gun. Now, I can't remember the name of this model. The Italians had many different types of 75mm gun in their army over the course of World War II. Now, I believe this is a World War I model, as is a lot of the Italian gear. This model itself is by Empress. It's the first model I've ever had from Empress Miniatures. Really enjoy the details on the crew. Really nice model. It was around a 15-piece metal model. So as you can see, it's a little bit wobbly. I did my best, but I can assure you I was gluing my thumbs and fingers together more than I was gluing the pieces. But the finished effect is really nice. I'm really happy with that. So this is a bit more of the heavy artillery. I usually don't go too much bigger than light or maybe medium artillery pieces, as they're usually going to be off board at that point. But I just like having an artillery gun, so there we are. So the final thing we have is the armour for the Italians. Now, I don't actually have their medium tank. They're the M1440 or 41, which was the most common tank that they had outside of the tankettes. Because this army is based for Sicily 1943, what I instead have is 4 captured French R35 tanks. These are 3D prints by Paint and Glue Miniatures. I'll just go over the tank itself and I'll tell you a kind of good piece of customer service from Paint and Glue. So the Italians asked the Germans to provide them with some of the captured French equipment. They were really hoping for Char Bs, as the Italian industry wasn't really able to cope with the level of armour you needed by the 1942. The Germans gave them some Somua S35s, which were guaranteed on Sardinia, and then some Renault R35s, a very dinky two-man tanks. Now, these were used in Sicily on a battle called the Battle of Gela. They were organised in something called Gruppo Mobiles, and they attacked, in this case, I think it was Gruppo Mobile E, attacked the US Rangers at Gela just after the US Rangers had landed. Now, it was a very brave attack by the Italians, but it just showed how outdated these tanks were. The infantry were stripped off by artillery fire, and then these tanks finally made it into the town, but they were just picked off by bazookas and anti-tank grenades. So all of the R35s on Sicily were eventually lost. There's some really interesting images of them. These are quite heavy tanks weight-wise, but there's many pictures of them completely on their side and where they've been knocked over by naval gunfire. Now, this one I've taken a little bit of a historical liberty. So this is an Semivente, I believe it's the 75-18. So it's got the 75mm gun on it. I think 18's probably got something to do with the size of the gun as well. Now, they did technically have these on Sicily. They had them in the most Italian way possible. They had 10 of these in a warehouse, but they never received the crews. So they were captured. They were never used in combat in Sicily. Some of the larger Semivente 90s were, but I think it's just more useful to use something that's a bit more enclosed. in games. This is the plastic kit by Warlord, as you can see there. It's the bare plastic. I quite enjoyed this. I know some people have magnetized it, so you can make the M14, 41 or 42 with it. I don't really know if I can be bothered. I have occasionally dabbled with magnetizing. This one seemed to be, for the price they are, I'd just buy an M14, another one, and build it up as an M14 really. But yeah, really happy with this. It has the free tone camouflage that the Italians were using after Tunisia. It's just quite a nice tank. And it's usually a bit nasty. Finally, something that can stand up to Shermans. And then the final piece of armour is an auto blinder. Now these are like really cool looking armoured cars. Came across from the Desert Warfare. They needed a strong armoured car with a bit more armour. It's got dual directional steering, so this is actually the rear, but as you can see, you can reverse. It's got a nice 20mm cannon on top. Always handy to have to take out like armor and some infantry. And this is also a 3D print, as you can see there, by Paint and Glue Miniatures. I'm quite happy with this. So I've been doing some weathering techniques where you just get some desert paint, you water it down massively, you just apply it there. It looks scary when you're doing it because suddenly you think, I've ruined this painted model. But once it's dried, it just dries in the recesses and it looks dusty and like it's been driving out for a long while. So yeah, quite happy with that one. I know Warlord have just announced a plastic one. I don't know whether I'd pick one up because I'm just happy with this 3D print. So, but I can talk about next steps in a second. Now, as you can see here, there's a mixture of uniforms on the Italians. So let's take this look at this chap here. The Italian European uniform, which included the uniform they wore on Sicily, generally speaking, was this kind of green-grey. I think I've painted mine a little bit darker than other people do. There's a lot of debate about what shade it is. I think in the end, they're going to be various shapes. There wasn't necessarily huge uniformity by this period. And I think they just kind of had what they had. And if you look at some images of Sicily, quite a few are wearing pieces of desert uniform that was due to be shipped out to Tunisia, but they'd capitulated by then. So as you can see, I've put in a mix of uniforms. I've also put in a few chaps who have the sun hat there. I think it's just a really cool piece. And there is some images of them wearing them in Sicily. So I think it just adds a bit of disuniformity to the uniformity. It makes them look a little bit more ragtag and not quite as elite and ready to go. But it's been a really enjoyable project to do. I think Warlord have done, as most of this stuff is Warlord, they've done a fantastic job with this plastic kit. So as I've painted mine up to be just regular infantry from the Livorno division, I've just used the regular kit. But there's a kit with some slight changes for Bersaglieri and some kit with slight changes for Alpini. I bought to start off with, as I said, I got 2 of the infantry boxes. Then I got the support group, so it's 4 of the command figures here, the mortar and the machine gun. Then I got the weapons team down the line, and then just picked up the 47mm cannon, artillery gun, and then the armour later. So all in all, I'm really happy with this project. Now, where do we go with next steps? Is a project ever really done? In my head, I think it gets to a point where you have to call a project. I could keep painting Italians. I really enjoy the history of it. There's some really interesting scenarios you can do with them. I do have a L640 light tank, and one of my friends for my birthday printed me off this crazy Fiat truck that they only had 1 or 2 of, but it was completely armoured. So I've got one of them to paint up, as well as about 20 more plastic guys. But for the moment, there's a complete force here. I'm going to focus my time on some other projects. For 28mm, I'm going to actually focus now on painting up some British to face them. I'm going to use a combination of the Desert, the 8th Army kit and the Northwest Europe kit to kind of kit bash some 1943 Italy British. So yeah, thanks very much for watching. If you've got any questions about where I got any from or how I painted it, please let me know, and I'll do another project update soon enough.